Black janitor fixes what 15 engineers failed to. If you're so smart, fix it yourself, they said. Harold Johnson never imagined that his 2 decades collecting trash at the Golden Valley food processing plant would prepare him for the greatest challenge of his life. At 45, he knew every corner of that company like no one else, from the administrative halls to the most hidden storage rooms. It was a rainy Monday in March when the plant's main generator made a strange noise and stopped completely. The silence that followed echoed through the entire company like a dark omen. 300 employees depended on that machine to keep their jobs, and everyone knew that without it running, production was doomed. Richard Barnes, the general manager, ran his hands through his graying hair as he stared at the silent generator. The company had 48 hours to solve the problem before contracts with supermarkets were cancelled. Without hesitation, he called the largest engineering firm in the area. 15 engineers arrived the next morning, carrying modern equipment and shiny tablets. They circled the machine like doctors examining a terminal patient. For hours, they tested every component, consulted technical manuals, and called experts from other cities. Harold watched everything while doing his morning rounds. He had known that generator for 20 years. He had heard its groans during early mornings when he came to work on weekends for extra pay. He knew when the machine was happy and when it was struggling. The lead engineer, a thin man with golden glasses named Gregory Mitchell, waved impatiently at Harold as he passed by pushing his cart. "Could you work in another department today? We need to focus here." Harold just nodded and moved on, but something bothered him. The sound he had heard the night before when he came to pick up some forgotten materials wouldn't leave his head. It was a noise he knew well, similar to what he heard in the old generators in his neighborhood. By the end of the first day, the engineers had found nothing. Gregory Mitchell gathered his team and announced they would need more time and specialized equipment. Richard Barnes felt sweat running down his back, even with the air conditioning on. That night, Harold returned home to Riverside, where he had lived for over 15 years. His wife, Deborah, was preparing dinner when he arrived. She was a retired nurse and could always read the worry on her husband's face. "What's wrong, honey? You've had that look since yesterday." Harold told her about the situation at the plant as she served the meal. Sitting at their small kitchen table, he shared his suspicions about the generator's problem. "I think I know what it might be, Deborah. That noise, I've heard it before." Deborah stopped eating and looked at him carefully. She had known her husband for over 20 years and knew he understood machines like few others. When they were younger, Harold had taken a technical course in mechanics but never got a job in the field. The positions always went to people with better connections or who fit the profile companies were looking for. "Why don't you talk to the manager?" Harold laughed bitterly. "Do you think Richard Barnes will listen to a janitor when he has 15 degreed engineers working on the problem?" In the next room, Emily, their 17-year-old daughter, listened to the conversation while studying. She dreamed of becoming an engineer and had spent countless nights watching her father fix broken appliances for the neighbors. She knew he understood machines more than he admitted. On the second day, the tension at the plant was palpable. The engineers arrived even earlier but still had no answers. Harold did his usual rounds but couldn't focus. With each pass by the generator section, his certainty grew. During lunch, he approached Michael, his 23-year-old son, who worked as a production assistant at the same company. "Dad, people are saying, if they don't fix it today, layoffs will start tomorrow." Harold felt a tightness in his chest. Michael had just gotten married and depended on that job. So many families were at risk, including his own. In the afternoon, while emptying the trash bins in the administrative section, Harold overheard a conversation that left him even more uneasy. Gregory Mitchell was on the phone with a colleague from New York. "No, we couldn't identify the issue. It might be that the machine has reached the end of its lifespan. Maybe it's best for the company to consider a full replacement." Harold knew a new machine would cost millions and would likely bankrupt the company. He felt he had to act even knowing the risk he was taking. He waited until the end of the workday and headed to Richard Barnes's office. He knocked on the door, his heart racing. "Come in." Richard was slumped in his chair, piles of papers scattered across his desk. When he saw Harold, His expression showed surprise. "Harold, is something wrong?" "Mr. Barnes, I know this might sound strange, but I think I know what's happening with the generator." Richard stared at him for a long moment, as if processing the words. "Harold, we have 15 expert engineers working on the problem for 2 days now." "I know, sir, but I've known this machine for 20 years. I hear it running every night when I come to work, and the noise it made before shutting down. I've heard it before." Richard stood and walked to the window overlooking the factory yard. Harold could see the muscles in his jaw tightening as he thought. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. "Where did you hear that noise?" "In the old generators in my neighborhood, sir. My grandfather was a mechanic and taught me a few things when I was a boy. Later, I took a technical course, but..." Harold stopped, feeling he might be saying too much. "But what?" "I never got to work in the field, sir. They always wanted experience I couldn't get." Richard returned to his desk and sat down, studying Harold's face. There was something in the man's conviction that intrigued him. "What do you think it is?" "It might be an issue with the coil alignment, sir. When they get misaligned from vibration, they make exactly that noise before stopping. It's an old problem, common in generators from the 90s. Richard remained silent for a few minutes that felt like an eternity to Harold. "Did you mention this to the engineers?" "I tried to approach them, but they were too busy with their own equipment." On the morning of the third day, Richard gathered the engineers and mentioned Harold's theory. Gregory Mitchell didn't hide his irritation. "Richard, with all due respect, we can't waste time on guesses from employees without technical training. We're dealing with complex equipment that requires specialized knowledge." "But what if he's right?" "Impossible. We already checked the coil alignment with precision equipment. Everything's within normal parameters." Richard sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Only a few hours remained before the deadline. Then something unexpected happened. At lunch, Harold was eating alone in the cafeteria when Gregory Mitchell approached his table. The engineer looked exhausted, with deep bags under his eyes and a wrinkled shirt. "Harold, right?" "Richard told me about your theory on the coils." Harold nearly choked on his sandwich. "Yes, sir. May I ask where you learned about generators?" Harold took a deep breath. This was his chance to be taken seriously. "My grandfather, Old Ray, was a mechanic here in the area. When I was a boy, he used to take me to see the old farm equipment. Later, I took a technical course in industrial mechanics at the community college." Gregory sat down across from Harold, catching the attention of other employees in the cafeteria. "Why have you never worked in the field?" The question touched an old wound. Harold looked at his calloused hands before answering. "I was always told I didn't have the profile companies were looking for, sir, so I ended up working in cleaning to support my family." Gregory fell silent, seeming to reflect on something. "Your precision equipment might not detect a subtle misalignment, sir," Harold continued, gaining courage. "Sometimes the issue isn't the magnitude of the misalignment, but the frequency of the vibration it causes." Gregory leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." "When the coils are slightly out of position, they create a resonant frequency that builds up over time. It's like a drop of water falling in the same spot. Eventually it wears through the stone." Gregory rubbed his face, seriously considering Harold's words. "And how do you suggest we check this?" "It has to be done manually, sir, by touch, feeling the vibration directly on the components while the machine is running." "But the machine isn't running." Harold smiled for the first time in days. "That's why we need to force a manual start, sir. Just for a few seconds, enough to feel where the irregular vibration is." Gregory glanced around the cafeteria, noticing several employees listening with interest. He stood abruptly. "Come with me." The two walked to the generator section, where the other engineers were still working with their equipment. Gregory got everyone's attention. "Everyone, we're trying a different approach." He explained Harold's theory about the coil vibration and saw skepticism on his colleagues' faces. "Gregory, this is very basic," said Jennifer Smith, a young engineer specializing in electrical systems. "Our equipment has already measured all of that." "But what if there's something the equipment can't detect?" An older engineer, William Peterson, laughed loudly. Are you suggesting a janitor knows more about engineering than we do? The comment created an awkward silence. Harold felt his face grow hot, but Gregory raised his hand. I'm suggesting that 20 years of observing this specific machine might have taught him things our degrees didn't cover. The tension in the air was palpable. Harold felt like an intruder in that world of white and yellow hard hats, wearing his simple work clothes. If you're so confident in his theory, William said dismissively, let him try to fix it himself. If he's so smart, let him do it. The words echoed through the warehouse like a challenge. Harold felt every job opportunity he'd never had, every time he'd been judged by his appearance, every silent humiliation he'd swallowed over the years. I'll do it, Harold said, surprising everyone, including himself. Richard Barnes arrived just then, alerted by an employee about the argument. What's going on here? William smirked. Harold here thinks he can fix what we couldn't. I said if he's so smart, let him try. Richard looked from Harold to the engineers, sensing the weight of the situation. Harold, are you sure about this? I am, Mr. Barnes, but I'll need some specific tools and permission to work on the equipment. Gregory, who had stayed quiet, stepped forward. I authorize it, and I'll help you. The statement caused a stir among the other engineers. Jennifer Smith pulled Gregory by the arm. Gregory, you're risking your career for some crazy theory. Maybe, but we've been stuck for 3 days with no results. What do we have to lose? Harold Johnson felt a mix of gratitude and terror. Now there was no turning back. He had publicly accepted the challenge in front of 15 engineers and the general manager. That night, Harold returned home carrying the weight of his decision. Deborah was waiting in the living room, along with Emily and Michael. They had all heard what happened through the rumors circulating at the company. Dad, are you sure about this? Michael asked, worried. If it goes wrong, they could fire you. And if it goes right, son, maybe I can prove a man isn't just worth the diploma on his wall. Emily walked up to her father and hugged him tightly. Dad, I always knew you understood machines better than anyone. Remember when you fixed old Joe's generator that 3 technicians couldn't? Harold smiled, recalling the incident from years ago. Their neighbor's generator had failed during a blackout, and Harold had managed to identify and fix the problem in just a few minutes. Deborah sat beside her husband on the worn-out living room couch. Harold, I've kept something all these years. She stood up and went to the bedroom, returning with a yellowed folder. Inside were Harold's technical course certificates and a few recommendation letters from professors. I always knew you'd need these someday. Harold took the papers with trembling hands. It had been so long since he'd forgotten those old dreams. And there's one more thing, Emily said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. All my college savings. If you need tools or parts, use it. Harold's eyes welled up. His daughter had worked part-time for 2 years to save that money. Emily, I can't take this. Dad, you always told me education is the one thing no one can take from us. But you forgot something. Experience is education too. And you have 20 years of it that none of them have. The next morning, Harold arrived at the factory an hour early. He wanted time to examine the generator calmly, without the pressure of curious eyes. Gregory was already there, sipping coffee from a disposable cup. Couldn't sleep either. Harold shook his head. I was thinking about the strategy all night, Mr. Gregory. Just call me Gregory. I think we'll be working pretty close today. The two approached the massive generator. Harold walked around the machine, studying every detail as if seeing it for the first time. His experienced hands touched the metal surface, feeling the marks of time and wear. First thing we need to do is try a manual start, Harold said. Just a few seconds so I can feel where the abnormal vibration is. Gregory agreed, and they began preparing the procedure. It was risky to try powering up a failed machine, but it was the only way to diagnose the problem Harold suspected. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. When the other engineers arrived, they found Harold and Gregory working together. The scene bothered some of them, especially William Peterson, who made sure to voice his displeasure. Gregory, I hope you know what you're doing. If anything goes wrong, it's on you. I know, Gregory replied without looking up from his work. Harold connected the manual starter cables while explaining each step to Gregory. His confidence grew as his hands moved over the familiar components. Now, when I give the signal, you engage the starter for exactly 5 seconds. No more than that. Gregory placed his hand on the button as Harold approached the main coils. The moment of truth had arrived. Now! The generator groaned and began to vibrate. Harold placed his hands on different points of the coils, feeling the variations in vibration. Within seconds, he pinpointed exactly what he was looking for. Turn it off. Silence returned, but Harold was smiling. Found it. Coil number 3 is misaligned by about 2 millimeters to the left. It's too subtle for the equipment to detect, but enough to create the resonance that locks up the system. Gregory looked at him in admiration. How can you be sure with just 5 seconds of testing? Because each coil has a unique vibration signature when properly aligned. Number 3 is singing a different tune than the others. Jennifer Smith approached, skeptical. Even if you're right, realigning a coil like this requires specialized equipment. It's not something you can do by hand. Harold smiled. My grandfather taught me an old technique for this. It works on generators like these, built before full automation. He explained they'd need to remove some panels and use a combination of manual levers and tensioning techniques to gradually reposition the coil. It's delicate but possible. The problem is I'll need some specific tools we don't have here. Richard Barnes, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. What tools? Harold listed the necessities. Special wrenches, steel cables of varying thicknesses, a small hydraulic jack, and some electrical insulation components. The total cost would be significant. Emily already said I could use her savings, Harold added, pulling the envelope from his pocket. Richard shook his head. Keep that money, the company will buy the tools. Richard's decision even surprised Gregory. William Peterson couldn't hold back. Richard, you're throwing money away on some absurd theory. William, in 3 days you haven't even presented a theory. I'm betting on Harold's experience. While waiting for the tools to arrive, Harold took the time to study the generator's technical manuals. Gregory was impressed by how quickly he absorbed the technical details and connected them to his practical experience. Harold, where did you learn to read electrical diagrams like that? At the community college, 25 years ago. And after that, by watching the technicians who came for maintenance here at the factory, I always paid attention to what they did. During lunch, Michael approached his father in the cafeteria. His expression was worried. Dad, people are placing bets on whether you'll succeed. Some are rooting against you. Harold wasn't surprised. He knew his attempt touched on issues beyond simple mechanics. What about you, son? Where's your bet? Michael smiled. I'm betting my dad will show everyone what he's capable of. The tools arrived early that afternoon. Harold inspected them carefully, verifying each item met his specifications. Everything seemed perfect. As he prepared the equipment, a crowd gathered around the generator. Employees from all departments made excuses to pass by and watch the situation unfold. Harold, Gregory said quietly, there are a lot of people watching, feeling the pressure. A little, Harold admitted, but I'm also determined. This might be my only chance to prove what I can do. Harold began by removing the access panels to the coils. Every movement was calculated and precise. His years of experience had taught him to work with extra care around electrical equipment. When he exposed the main coils, even the most skeptical engineers came closer to observe. Harold pointed to coil number 3. Can you see? It's slightly misaligned compared to the others. Gregory examined it carefully and had to admit there was a subtle, almost imperceptible difference. It's very slight, Jennifer Smith remarked. Just a few millimeters. Exactly, said Harold. Enough to cause problems, but too little for conventional equipment to detect. The realignment process was slow and meticulous. Harold used a combination of techniques that impressed even the most experienced engineers. He applied gradual force with the levers while monitoring the tension with hand tools he had improvised. Where did you learn this technique? Gregory asked. My grandfather always said machines talk to those who know how to listen. This technique dates back to 1960, when workers repaired generators themselves without so much specialized equipment. As he worked, Harold shared stories about his grandfather Raymond Johnson, who had been one of the most respected mechanics in the region during the 1950s and 1960s. He had no formal education, but he understood machines like no one else. He used to say every piece of equipment has its own personality. William Peterson, who had kept his distance, couldn't resist a sarcastic remark. Machine personality. How primitive. Harold stopped working and looked directly at him. With all due respect, Mr. William, have you ever worked with old equipment that didn't have computers to diagnose problems? No, but then perhaps you don't understand that sometimes hands-on experience is worth more than diplomas on the wall. The comment created a tense silence. Gregory quickly stepped in to prevent further argument. Let's get back to work, everyone. Harold resumed the realignment, but the tension in the room had grown. He felt he was being tested not just technically, but as a person. After 2 hours of careful work, Harold finally positioned the coil correctly. He used borrowed measuring tools from the engineers to confirm the alignment was perfect. Done, he announced. Now let's test it. The moment of truth had arrived. If Harold was wrong, he wouldn't just lose credibility. He'd also embarrass Gregory and Richard, who had vouched for him. Everyone stepped back as Harold made the final connections. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from anticipation. 20 years of observation and learning would be tested in the next few minutes. Gregory, can you engage the normal startup system? Gregory positioned himself at the control panel while Harold watched the generator intently. The warehouse fell completely silent. Engaging now. The generator emitted a low hum, then another, and gradually came to life. The sound was different now, smooth, harmonic, without the irregular vibrations Harold had identified. Within minutes, the generator was running at full capacity. The instruments showed all normal parameters. The factory lights shone at full brightness again. A stunned silence filled the warehouse for a few seconds, followed by an explosion of cheers from the workers who had gathered to watch. Harold leaned against the wall, exhausted, but relieved. He had done it. 20 years of quiet work and careful observation had led to the greatest success of his career. Gregory approached with a wide smile. Harold, that was extraordinary. How do you feel? Like I've finally proved what I always knew I could do. Richard Barnes came running, his face filled with relief and gratitude, an expression Harold would never forget. Harold, you saved the company. You saved 300 jobs. How can I thank you? Before Harold could respond, William Peterson approached. His expression was a mix of embarrassment and reluctant admiration. Harold, I need to apologize. You proved you were right, and I was wrong to doubt you. Harold extended his hand to the engineer. No need to apologize, Mr. William. We all learn different things in life. What matters is that the problem was solved. Harold's gesture impressed everyone. Even after being publicly humiliated, he showed grace and dignity in victory. In the hours that followed, news of Harold's achievements spread throughout the company. Employees who barely knew him came to congratulate him. That night, Harold arrived home to find his family waiting with a simple but lovingly made cake. Deborah had decorated it with the words, "Our hero." "How are you feeling, Dad?" asked Emily. "I'm feeling like it's never too late to show what we're capable of," Harold replied, moved. Michael raised a glass of soda in an impromptu toast. To the man who was always an engineer, even when the world didn't recognize it. The next day, Richard Barnes called Harold into his office. When he arrived, he also found Gregory and an elegant woman he didn't know. "Harold, this is Dr. Barbara Wilson, our Director of Human Resources. She came specifically to speak with you." Harold sat nervously, unsure what to expect. "Harold," Dr. Barbara began, "yesterday you demonstrated exceptional technical knowledge. The company would like to make some changes to your position." Harold felt his heart race. What kind of changes? "First, we'd like to promote you to General Maintenance Supervisor. You'd be responsible for overseeing all repairs and preventive maintenance for the factory's equipment." Harold could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Second," Dr. Barbara continued, "the company would like to sponsor the completion of your mechanical engineering degree. We have an agreement with the local university." The words echoed in the office like music. Harold felt like he was dreaming. "And third," Richard said, We want you to develop a training program for our employees, combining formal technical knowledge with hands-on experience. Harold sat silently for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the changes being proposed. I don't know what to say. Say you accept, Gregory smiled. The company needs people like you, and you deserve this opportunity. Harold thought of his family, of all the years of quiet work, of all the times he'd been underestimated because of his position. I accept, with great pride. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The news of Harold's promotion spread quickly through the company and the community. In the Riverside neighborhood, he became an example of how it was possible to overcome limitations and prejudice through dedication and skill. Emily especially was moved by the changes in her father's life. Dad, now we'll both be studying engineering together. It'll be different, sweetheart. I'll be studying theories about things I already know from experience, while you'll be learning everything from scratch. But we'll help each other. You teach me the practical side, and I'll help you with modern theory. Harold's new position brought responsibilities he embraced with enthusiasm. In his first months as supervisor, he implemented several improvements based on his 2 decades of experience observing the equipment. Gregory, who had become his close partner, was impressed by the innovative ideas Harold presented. Harold, where did you learn about preventive maintenance? Just watching, Gregory. 20 years of seeing when machines started showing signs of trouble, but no one ever asked me what I'd noticed. Harold developed a monitoring system based on sensory observation that complemented the electronic equipment. He taught employees to listen to the sounds of the machines, feel for unusual vibrations, and spot subtle changes in operation. Machines talk to us all the time, Harold would explain in his training sessions. We just need to learn to listen. The training program Harold created became a model for other companies in the area. It combined technical theory with hands-on experience in a way no one had tried before. During one of these sessions, a young technician asked, "Mr. Harold, how do you know a machine is about to fail before the monitoring equipment detects anything?" Harold smiled, remembering a saying his grandfather used to repeat. "My grandfather always told me machines are like people. When they're sick, they change their behavior before showing obvious symptoms. The trick is knowing them well enough to notice those changes." Harold's story reached companies in other cities too. He started getting invitations to speak about the importance of hands-on experience in industrial maintenance. At one of these talks in the neighboring town of San Diego, Harold met other professionals who'd been through similar situations. He realized his experience wasn't unique, but few had gotten the same opportunity he had. "What bothers me most," Harold told Deborah that night, "is thinking about how many people like me are out there with valuable knowledge, but never get a chance to show what they can do." Deborah hugged him warmly. "Maybe your mission now is to help give those chances to others." The idea stuck in Harold's mind. He started thinking of ways to recognize and value the practical knowledge of employees in positions like the one he'd held before. He talked to Richard about creating a company program to identify hidden talents among the staff. The idea was met with enthusiasm. "Harold, this is brilliant," Richard said. "How many Harolds must be scattered across our company without us even knowing?" The program launched 6 months later. Harold designed a system where any employee could suggest improvements or solutions based on their experience, no matter their formal role. The results were astounding. Within months, dozens of valuable ideas came from janitors, workers, drivers, and others rarely consulted on technical matters. One of the most important discoveries came from Mrs. Eleanor, a 62-year-old woman who'd worked in the cafeteria for 15 years. She'd noticed a pattern in electrical issues that always followed heavy rain. "Mr. Harold," she said during one of the program's monthly meetings, "I always see the lights flicker the day after big storms. Could there be water leaking somewhere?" Mrs. Eleanor's observation led to uncovering a serious structural issue that had gone unnoticed for years. Left unfixed, it could have caused a dangerous short circuit. Cases like this multiplied, proving Harold's belief that experience and careful observation were just as valuable as formal technical knowledge. Harold's reputation kept growing. He was asked to write articles for industry magazines about the importance of hands-on experience. In one, he wrote, "For years we believed knowledge only came from books and universities. But we forget that people who work daily with equipment and processes develop a unique and valuable understanding. It's time we value that experience and build bridges between formal and practical knowledge." The article gained national attention. Harold began receiving invitations from universities to give talks about his experience and methods. At one of these lectures at Stanford University School of Engineering, Harold shared the stage with renowned professors. His presentation, based on real cases and hands-on experiences, was the most applauded of the event. "Professor Harold," asked a student, "what advice would you give to future engineers?" Harold smiled at being called professor for the first time. "Never dismiss the knowledge of those who work in practice, even if they don't have a degree. And always remember that machines are extensions of the people who operate them. Respect both." His answer earned a long round of applause. Meanwhile, at the Golden Valley factory, the improvements implemented by Harold and his team had resulted in a significant reduction in maintenance costs and equipment downtime. Richard Barnes couldn't stop praising the results. "Harold, in 2 years, you've revolutionized our operations. The numbers speak for themselves." "It wasn't just me, Mr. Richard. It was the whole team, including people who've always been here, but were never heard." The company decided to officially document the methods Harold had developed. Gregory Mitchell was assigned to help create a manual combining theory and practice. "Harold, this manual will be used in other companies in the group," Gregory explained. "Your techniques are becoming industry standards." Harold felt proud, but also humble. He knew it had all started with his grandfather, Raymond, a simple man who understood that machines and people weren't so different after all. Emily, now in her second year of engineering, often studied with her father. Their conversations had grown richer, with her bringing modern theory and him contributing practical experience. "Dad, at college they're teaching your methods," Emily said one evening. "You've become an academic reference." Harold laughed. "Who would have thought a garbage man would turn into university study material?" "You were never just a garbage man, Dad. You were always an engineer who worked as a garbage man." His daughter's words struck Harold deeply. He realized he'd spent years defining himself by his job, not by who he truly was. One Friday afternoon, 3 years after the generator incident, Harold was in his office when he received an unexpected call. "Hello, Harold. This is Professor Charles Thompson from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology." Harold recognized the name. Professor Thompson was a national authority in mechanical engineering. "Professor Thompson, it's an honor." "Harold, I'm calling with an invitation. The university would like to offer you a position as a visiting professor to teach our new course, Integration of Theory and Practice in Mechanical Engineering." Harold nearly dropped the phone. "Visiting professor, but I'm still finishing my degree." "We know, but your experience and methods are unique. We want you to teach our students what isn't in the textbooks." The offer was tempting, but Harold knew his mission at Golden Valley was just beginning. "Professor Thompson, the invitation is an honor, but for now, my place is here. There's still much work to do." "I understand. But know the university's doors will always be open to you." After hanging up, Harold reflected on the journey he'd taken. From a dismissed garbage man to a nationally recognized expert, all in just a few years. But he knew the most important thing wasn't the recognition. It was the certainty that he had managed to prove that competence and knowledge don't depend solely on diplomas, but on dedication, observation, and a willingness to learn. That evening, during dinner with the family, Harold shared Professor Thompson's phone call. "Dad, are you going to accept?" asked Michael. "Not yet, son. Here at the factory, there are still so many people with valuable knowledge waiting for a chance to show what they can do." Deborah smiled proudly. "You haven't changed a bit, Harold. Still putting others first." "It's not that, dear. I've learned that when we get an opportunity, our responsibility is to create opportunities for others." Harold's philosophy became the motto of the company's talent recognition program. On the main bulletin board in the factory, a phrase summed up his vision. True knowledge comes from the combination of study and experience. No one knows everything, but everyone knows something. Over the years, dozens of employees were promoted or had their skills recognized through the program Harold created. The company became a national model for participatory management and valuing practical knowledge. Harold finally earned his engineering degree at 50 years old. The graduation ceremony was emotional, with the whole family present. Emily, who had graduated a year earlier, was especially proud. "Dad, now we're officially colleagues in the profession." "We are, sweetheart. But you've always been my life teacher." During the commencement speech, Harold was mentioned as an example that it's never too late to achieve dreams, and that experience and formal education can and should go hand in hand. After graduation, Harold continued working in the same office at the Golden Valley factory, but now as the head maintenance engineer. His first decision was to create an internship program for young people in the community, especially those who couldn't afford college. "I'll teach them what my grandfather taught me," he said to Gregory, "that machines speak to those who know how to listen, and that true knowledge comes from the heart and hands, not just the head." The internship program was a huge success. Young people who had never imagined working in industry discovered talents they didn't know they had. During one of the program's monthly meetings, one of the interns, a 16-year-old boy named Joe, asked a question that deeply moved Harold. "Mr. Harold, do you think I can get to where you are, even coming from a poor family?" Harold looked at the boy and saw himself over 30 years earlier. "Joe, I'll tell you a secret. I didn't get where I am in spite of being poor. I got here because I learned to value every opportunity to learn, even when people thought I was just a janitor. So, you think I can do it? I think you can go much further than I did because you're starting earlier and with more opportunities." The conversation with Joe made Harold reflect on his legacy. He realized his story had grown bigger than himself, inspiring people he didn't even know. On a sunny Thursday afternoon, 5 years after fixing the generator, Harold was visited by a journalist from a national magazine. The reporter wanted to write a piece about professionals who had transformed their lives through perseverance. "Mr. Harold, what was the hardest moment of this whole journey?" Harold thought for a moment. "It was when engineer William Peterson said, 'If you're so smart, fix it.' In that moment, I felt the weight of every time I'd been underestimated in life. But I also felt it was my chance to prove that competence has no color, social class, or job title." And what was the most rewarding moment? When the generator started working again, of course. But the truly rewarding moment was realizing that my experience could help others discover their own talents. The article was published under the title, "The Garbage Man Who Became a Professor: How Hands-on Experience Revolutionized a Company." The impact was nationwide, with dozens of companies reaching out to Harold to implement similar programs. Harold began offering consulting services, always keeping his job at the Golden Valley factory as his foundation. He had found his true calling, teaching that knowledge and wisdom can come from anywhere. During one of his most memorable speeches in Washington, D.C., Harold said, "I've learned that there are no small jobs, only people who don't recognize their own potential. Each of us can be an expert at something, as long as we have the humility to learn and the courage to share what we know." The quote went viral on social media and was adopted as a slogan by several professional empowerment campaigns. Gregory, who remained Harold's partner and friend over the years, often accompanied him to his talks. "Harold, have you ever thought about writing a book about your experience?" "I have, Gregory, but I think my story isn't over yet. I want more to tell before putting it on paper." Indeed, Harold kept discovering new talents among the company's employees. Every person he helped develop became part of his own story of fulfillment. Mrs. Eleanor, the cafeteria lady who had identified the electrical issue, was promoted to building safety supervisor. At 65, she discovered she had an exceptional eye for spotting safety hazards. "Mr. Harold," she said one day, "you changed my life. I thought all I knew was cooking, but I found out I know so much more." "Mrs. Eleanor, I didn't change anything. I just helped you see what was already there. Stories like Mrs. Eleanor's multiplied. The Golden Valley factory became known not just for the quality of its products, but for its revolutionary approach to valuing human potential. Richard Barnes, who was nearing retirement, often said that betting on Harold had been the best decision of his career. "Harold, when you fixed that generator, you didn't just repair a machine, you fixed our entire company culture." Harold's influence extended beyond the factory. Several technical schools in the region began incorporating courses on valuing hands-on experience into their curricula. The university where Emily had studied created a scholarship in Harold Johnson's name, aimed at low-income youth who showed technical potential regardless of prior education. "Dad, you have a scholarship named after you," Emily said, moved. "Your grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandfather helped many people get an education." The mention of future grandchildren made Harold smile. Emily had started dating a college classmate, and Michael was engaged to a teacher at the local community college. "I just hope they understand that what matters isn't the name on the scholarship, but the opportunities it will create for others." One Monday morning, 10 years after the generator incident, Harold arrived at work to a surprise. A commemorative plaque had been installed in the factory courtyard reading, "In recognition of Harold Johnson, who taught us that true knowledge comes from the union of study and experience, and that every human being has the potential to teach and learn." The plaque's unveiling ceremony was attended by local officials, regional business leaders, and dozens of employees who had benefited from Harold's programs. During his speech, Harold said, "This plaque isn't a recognition for me. It's a reminder to all of us that we should always be open to learning from anyone in any situation. Knowledge has no owner, and wisdom can come from where we least expect it." The audience rose in a prolonged standing ovation. Among those present was William Peterson, the engineer who had challenged Harold years before. After the ceremony, William approached Harold. "Harold, I came here to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "Because you taught me a lesson that changed how I see people. Since that day, I always make sure to listen to employees at all levels before making technical decisions." Harold extended his hand to William. "William, we both learned something that day. I learned I can trust my experience, and you learned you can trust the experience of others." The handshake between the two symbolized a reconciliation that went beyond the personal, representing the union of formal and practical knowledge. That evening, Harold dined with his extended family. Deborah, now with a few grey hairs, remained his safe harbor. Emily had brought her boyfriend, and Michael was with his fiancée. "Dad," said Michael, "I was thinking, when you fixed that generator, you didn't just change the factory, you changed our whole family." "How so, son?" "You taught us that we shouldn't accept limits others place on us, that we can be more than our circumstances allow." Harold felt his eyes well up. He realized the greatest fix he'd made wasn't the generator, but his own self-esteem and his family's confidence in their dreams. "What do you all think about expanding our program to other businesses in the area?" Harold asked. "Dad, you never stop, do you?" Emily laughed, "always thinking about how to help more people." "It's just something I've learned, sweetheart. When we're given an opportunity, it's our duty to multiply that opportunity for others." The idea of expanding the program took shape in the following months. Harold created a consulting firm specializing in identifying and developing hidden talent in companies. The first client was a textile factory in a neighboring town facing similar problems to what Golden Valley had years before. In just 6 months, Harold and his team identified dozens of improvements suggested by employees who had never been consulted. One of the most surprising discoveries came from a 58-year-old seamstress who had noticed a pattern in fabric defects. Her observation led to identifying a calibration issue in the machines that had gone unnoticed by specialized technicians. "It's always the same," Harold remarked to Gregory. "People who work daily with processes develop an intuitive knowledge that perfectly complements formal technical expertise." Harold's consulting firm grew quickly, but he made sure to keep it lean and close to clients. He didn't want it to become just another company promising miracle solutions without understanding each place's reality. During one of his visits to a metalworking company, Harold met Walter, a 60-year-old welder who had developed his own technique for welding complex parts. Walter, Where did you learn this technique? Taught myself, Mr. Harold. After 30 years of welding, you end up figuring out your own ways of doing things. Harold documented Walter's technique and included it in the company's training program. Within months, weld quality improved significantly across the entire factory. Walter, Harold said during one visit, have you ever thought about teaching your technique to other welders? Who'd want to learn from an old man like me? Every new welder in this company, if you give them a chance. Walter became a technical instructor at the company, teaching his techniques to the new generations. The transformation in his self-esteem was visible to everyone. Stories like Walter's multiplied wherever Harold went. He had discovered that his true mission wasn't just fixing machines, but helping people uncover and value their own knowledge. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this inspiring story and where you're following us from. Do you know someone who, like Harold, had their skills underestimated but managed to prove their worth? Leave your honest opinion in the comments about this extraordinary man's journey of overcoming challenges. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.